Hi, welcome back. This is Dr. Burton, and we are going through Professor Gangadean's book, Philosophical Foundation, a critical analysis of basic beliefs. Today we're on chapter 1, Clarity, Philosophy, and Reason. And I may break this into several videos depending on how long it's going to take. So let's talk about clarity first. On clarity, some things are clear. The basic things are clear. The basic things about God and man and good and evil are clear to reason. So this is the thesis of the book. And sometimes people get to this line and they go, what? Or they go, no. So after we finish this section, there is a footnote that leads to an argument for the first 3 lines. So we'll go through that argument as well. If nothing is clear, then the distinctions between A and non-A, being and non-being, true and false, good and evil, are not clear. Consistently held, skepticism leads to nihilism, the loss of all meaning. So nihilism means nothing, no meaning. Human beings are more or less conscious and consistent in understanding the meaning and implications of their beliefs. So no one's fully conscious, aware, no one's fully consistent, living it out in their basic beliefs. There are many degrees and kinds of skepticism, arising from degrees of consistency in basic belief, as well as from differences among persons. All skepticism is grounded in uncritically held assumptions. Those assumptions will be critically examined in preparing to show how some things are clear. So this book is going to hopefully show you how some things are clear. Persons as rational beings need meaning. Is that true? Do you need meaning? Do you know anyone who doesn't need meaning? Integrity as a basic form of honesty is a concern for consistency. But consistently held, skepticism leads to nihilism. The existential burden of nihilism is intolerable. It cannot with integrity be borne. Let's read that again. The existential burden of nihilism is intolerable. It cannot with integrity be borne. Isn't that a good sentence? So you can't live the implications of nihilism. It's impossible. As nihilism increases, integrity decreases. But integrity cannot be abandoned without self-deception and self-justification. Lack of integrity complicates the effort to show what is clear. So we're trying to show what is clear, and if we don't have integrity, we won't succeed in that. Fideism is the most common alternative to skepticism. Fideism is like faithism, blind faith, belief without proof. But it too assumes that basic things are not clear. In fideism, basic beliefs are held without proof. But understanding the meaning of what is clear at the basic level amounts to proof. Belief without proof based on understanding, therefore empties a belief of meaning. So if we're believing it without understanding it, we don't grasp the meaning of it, we empty the meaning of it. A worldview based on fideism, when challenged over time, must offer proof or, like skepticism, yield to nihilism. So when we hold to beliefs and we don't show the truth of those beliefs, we don't prove it, they become meaningless over time, and we will lose the meaning and fall into nihilism. There are many forms of fideism, just as there are many forms of skepticism. One form of fideism believes that, in principle, faith is opposed to proof. Another form of fideism holds beliefs based on arguments which are in fact unsound. So they may give an argument, but the argument is not a sound argument. Still another form of fideism holds beliefs without proof, without addressing the question of proof. Fideism may occur on both sides of an assertion. So 2 people in a conversation can both be fideists. Fideism may be both theistic and anti-theistic. It may be naturalistic or supernaturalistic. It may be sophistic or simplistic. Without understanding basic things that are clear, fideism, like skepticism, leads to loss of meaning and to loss of integrity. What is clear can be known by any person who is seeking to know. So the key here is the seeking part. Assuming integrity, seeking to know is the necessary and sufficient condition for knowing what is clear. There is no rational justification for failure to know what is clear, so there's no excuse for not knowing. One has to neglect, avoid, resist, or deny reason in order to avoid what is clear. A person may fail to know what is clear even while claiming to know what is clear. So a person can claim to know but really not know. If one knows what is clear, one should be able to show what is clear and be able to overcome commonly held objections to what is clear. Okay, so we should be able to show it and we should be able to overcome objections. If some things are clear, then basic things are clear. Thinking, by nature, is presuppositional. We think of what is less basic in light of what is more basic. So more basic first, then less basic. If what is more basic is not clear, then what is less basic cannot be clear, and therefore nothing can be clear. So if this isn't clear, what's above it isn't going to be clear either. If there is agreement on what is more basic, which is clear, there will be agreement on what is less basic, which is also going to be clear if we can get there step by step. Basic things are searched out in the most basic questions we can ask. How is knowledge possible? What is real? What ought I to do? How knowledge is possible requires attention to the nature of thought and to reason as the laws of thought. It requires attention to the relation of truth and meaning and to reason as the test for meaning. It requires attention to experience and to the interpretation of experience in light of one's basic beliefs. So notice we have to pay attention. What is real requires the distinction between the temporal and the eternal, and attention to the questions whether there must be something eternal or whether it is possible that nothing is eternal. It deals with the question whether all is eternal in some form or other, or whether only some, for example, God, is eternal. So metaphysics asks the question, what is eternal? And looks at our options. Some, none, all. One's view of the origin and nature of man will depend on one's view of what is real. So human nature is less basic than ultimate reality. For example, if God exists, then God created humans and determined human nature. The question, what ought I to do, is based on the reality of choice and of values, which assume the notion of the highest value or the good. One's conception of good and evil will depend on one's conception of human nature. If, therefore, some things are clear and the basic things are clear, then the basic things about God and man and good and evil are clear to reason. So notice what we've done. Some things are clear. The basic things are clear. The basic things are about God, whether God exists or not, and human nature, which depends on your view of whether God exists or not, and good and evil for human nature. So we get metaphysics and ethics, and before that, it's clear to reason. So we have epistemology. Most basic epistemology, clear to reason, and then God and man, and then good and evil. Epistemology, metaphysics, ethics. These areas are about what is most basic, and what is most basic is clear. While knowing what is clear requires ability to show what is clear, showing what is clear does not require persuading another of what is clear. So there's a difference between giving proof and persuading a person. It's not our job to persuade someone. Our job is to show, and the other person's job is to see. To show what is clear requires giving a sound argument, and a sound argument is a valid inference and true premises. If you have a valid argument and the premises are true, the conclusion necessarily follows, and it is true, and it is knowledge. And that's what showing means. Sound arguments are persuasive only if one is committed to reason, and one's response to a sound argument reveals one's commitment. So if a person is presented with a sound argument and they are using reason, they will agree to the conclusion of a sound argument. So How we respond and how we give arguments shows our commitment to reason. While sound arguments may not persuade, they compel change in the attentive hearer. The hearer must agree or try to show that the argument is not sound. If this response is not merely a quibble, it will call into question what is most basic that has been taken as common ground. A response may go so far as to question the nature and authority of reason itself. So once we're confronted with a sound argument, we have to respond. We will change. Either we'll agree and change our mind and be persuaded, or we'll disagree and we'll have to come up with a counter argument, or we will possibly give up reason. A response may go so far as to question the nature and authority of reason itself. A basic belief may thus be professed apart from or against reason. So a person may believe something without having good reason for believing it. This change in position is one way in which a sound argument is compelling. So remember, a sound argument compels, it doesn't always persuade. It will only persuade if the person hearing the argument is committed to reason. If basic beliefs are clear to reason, then in a step-by-step process, by good and necessary consequences, less basic beliefs can also be clear to reason. So start with the most basic, step by step, giving arguments as we go. What is less basic will also be clear if you follow the step-by-step process. A set of beliefs so derived constitutes a coherent worldview. A worldview seeks to make sense of all aspects of human experience in order to satisfy the human need for meaning. A coherent worldview provides and retains meaning in light of the internal and external challenges of reason. A coherent worldview thus secures the basis of a lasting culture. So, a person has a set of beliefs, and if we go step by step, giving proof, giving arguments, and that set of beliefs has a solid foundation and is coherent, that is called a worldview. Now, there are worldviews that are not internally coherent. We will see a lot of those. And there are internal challenges to a worldview. We might have parts within the system that contradict, and we may have to go back and examine our assumptions and see, why is there a contradiction here? What am I holding to that doesn't make sense? And then external challenges are when people have questions about our world and life view, our basic beliefs, coming from outside, coming from a different set of assumptions and a different worldview. Those need to be responded to. And we do so by reason. And then a coherent worldview secures the basis of a lasting culture. A coherent worldview is one that will build a life for a person and for a society and a culture. So that's what we're looking for. And a culture sustained through time is a civilization. So that's what we're looking for. A city with foundations and one that's going to last. Now, what I didn't read was a footnote. Footnote 1, and footnote 1 says this: do not proceed if you do not agree that some things are clear. See Appendix 1 on the principle of clarity and common ground, the necessary condition for thought and discourse. So Professor Gangadean wanted us to put that after the first sentence, but we decided to let the person read the first few pages to see what he means by clarity, and then we put that footnote there to see Appendix 1. And Appendix 1 is new in this book. It's not in the first edition, and it's called Presupposition of Philosophical Foundation, the Principle of Clarity and Common Ground. Basically, it's a proof for the opening lines. So let's read through it together. The following is a brief explication and defense of the opening lines of Philosophical Foundation. The Principle of Clarity states, some things are clear, the basic things are clear, the basic things about God and man and good and evil are clear to reason. So he had written a proof for this. He used it in class, and I thought that proof is really great. It should be in the book. And so He wanted it in the book, and we put it here as the appendix, first appendix. There's also a second appendix. I won't go over that one today. The opening words affirm that some things are clear. This affirms the principle of clarity as a necessary condition for all thought and discourse, and therefore as common ground. So principle of clarity is part of common ground for all that follows in this whole book. Skepticism denies that some things are clear. By implication, skepticism affirms the contradictory, nothing is clear. Now think about that. Nothing is clear. What would that mean? What are the implications? A more formal statement of the proof that some things are clear is as follows. So here's his argument. Look, he's showing you. He's living what he preaches. Okay. Argument 1. Point 1. It is clear that contradictory statements cannot both be true and cannot both be false at the same time and in the same respect. So contradictory statements fit on the square of opposition. You can go find the diagrams of the square of opposition in the book. The contradiction of some things are clear is nothing is clear. So on the square, nothing is clear is here, something is clear is here. Both can't be true, both can't be false. If nothing is clear, then no distinction is clear. In general, no logical distinction between A and non-A would be clear. A being a variable for any particular distinction, basic or non-basic, any distinction. If no distinction is clear, then here are the implications. 1, the basic distinction between being and non-being is not clear. The basic distinction between true and false is not clear. And the basic distinction between good and evil is not clear. Point 4, if no logical distinction is clear, then no distinction is meaningful. This is a reductio ad absurdum, as we're making statements right now. And therefore, no meaning is logically possible. That is, if there is no distinction between true and false, then true and false would lack meaning. Every word would lack meaning. Point 5, if meaning is not possible, then thought and therefore talk are not possible. This is the ultimate nihilism. To think or talk or act is to make distinctions and therefore is to affirm meaning. If there is no concern for consistency, there is no possibility of dialogue and discussion ends. Point 6, it is not the case that there is no meaning. Nihilism is not existentially possible. We cannot consistently live and give up thinking or talking, which is self-referentially absurd. So have you ever tried to not think, not talk, not act? Either we stop thinking and talking, or we are inconsistent and are hypocrites. Point 7, therefore, the original nothing is clear is not possible, and the contradiction some things are clear must be true. And then he gives a symbolic argument. I'll let you look at that in your book to see the symbolic form of this argument. Okay, so that was the argument. Some things are clear. Now he gives an argument 2. The basic things are clear. Point 1, thinking by nature is presuppositional. We think of the less basic in light of the more basic. That's just how it works. Okay, here's subpoints under point 1. At the level of concept, we think of the finite and temporal in light of the infinite and eternal. So conceptually, infinite and eternal come first, finite and temporal come second. Our most basic beliefs are about our most basic concepts. Okay, so our most basic concept is about eternal. Point 2, at the level of judgment, we think of truth in light of meaning. So meaning first, then truth. And reason in meaning in light of reason. So reason, meaning, truth. We must know what a statement means before we can say whether it is true or not. Reason has the laws of thought, identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle, which we'll talk more about soon, is the test for meaning. Reason is the test for meaning. At the level of experience, we interpret experience in light of basic belief. So basic belief and then experience. No experience is meaningful without interpretation. Appearance is not reality. Appearance is appearance, and we interpret what appears to us. At the level of argument, we think of conclusion in light of premises. So premises first, then conclusion. Okay, that was all number 1. Thinking is by nature presuppositional. He gave several examples of that. Point 2, if the more basic is not clear, then the less basic cannot be clear, and therefore nothing is clear. Point 3, it is not the case that nothing is clear from argument 1. Some things are clear, therefore the basic things are clear. Now that's a tight argument. It's a beautiful argument. I would love to see how you can assail that argument. I'll pay you $50 to give me a counter argument. You want to show me that the basic things are not clear. All right. Then we go on. He gives some the symbolic form of the argument. And then we get argument 3. Basic things about God and man and good and evil are clear to reason. This assertion has 2 parts. A, the basic things are about God and man and good and evil. And B, the basic things are clear to reason. Okay, so first, the A section of this argument. Argument 3A, the basic things are about God and man and good and evil. The basic things are about our most basic judgment. Our most basic judgment is about our most basic concept. That is existence. And existence is either temporal or eternal. Eternal existence is more basic ontologically and epistemologically than temporal. So logically, eternal comes before temporal, and epistemologically, we know eternal prior to temporal. And in being, ontologically is in being. So if there's something temporal, it came from what is eternal. Point 3, therefore, our most basic judgment is about what is real or eternal. That is about God. Either God exists or God does not exist. Point 4, therefore, the basic things are about God. Point 5, since the basic things are clear from argument 2, it is clear what is eternal. That is, whether God exists or not. Point 6, if some things are clear about God, then some things are clear about man, i.e. human nature. Point 7, if some things are clear about man, then good and evil are clear because they're based on human nature. Therefore, point 8, the basic things are about God and man and good and evil. So, I think it's pretty tight. Check it out, read it. There's the symbolic form of the argument. It is valid. Do you think it's sound? Now we move on to argument 3B. The basic things are clear to reason. Okay. Point 1. Reason as the laws of thought make thought possible. So think about that. Reason has laws, and the laws make thought possible. What makes thought possible is most basic in the order of thinking. Therefore, reason is most basic in the order of thinking. Therefore, since basic things are clear from argument 2, the basic things are clear to reason. And then here's the summation of the whole thing. Therefore, the basic things about God and man, metaphysics, and good and evil, ethics, are clear to reason, epistemology. So your job now is to examine these arguments, and they are written in symbolic form. They are valid. Are they sound? That's your job to figure out. If you think they're not sound, please show me where they're not. If they are sound, you should believe them. Okay, there's one more little section here we'll go over, and that's the application of common ground and the principle of integrity. So remember, common ground is what allows for us to have discourse. Point 1, ground is that on which one stands and what makes a particular activity possible. 2, common ground is that on which all parties in a dialogue must stand, and what makes thought and dialogue concerning the basic questions of philosophy possible. So we have to have some agreement before even having a dialogue. Therefore, all dialogue must begin with common ground and made explicit, not merely assumed, in order to be secured. So we need to talk to one another to see, do we agree with the principle of clarity before we move on? Common ground grows at each step, in agreement, in dialogue. It is not to be abandoned by any party later in the dialogue. So let's say we secure agreement. Some things are clear, the basic things are clear. The basic things about God and man and good and evil are clear to reason, and we agree here. Can we take the next step? Can we take the next step? If we go here and we see the implications, are we going to then deny that we agreed down here? That happens. Dialogue should be suspended if common ground is called into question. The condition for suspension should be made explicit to all who participate in the dialogue and is to be resolved before resuming dialogue. Otherwise, we're going to be starting where we disagree and not finding agreement anywhere else, and it will be fruitless dialogue, fruitless words without meaning. Therefore, all parties share responsibility to uphold and promote common ground. So there's a moral responsibility here. Dialogue assumes responsibility, integrity. Common ground assumes and requires the principle of clarity, that some things are clear, that knowledge concerning basic things is possible. The burden of proof to show what is clear is shared by all based on common ground. So the burden of proof isn't on one party only. The burden of proof is to be shared. If we're seeking to know, we will share the burden of proof to show. The principle of clarity is opposed to skepticism and fideism at the basic level, both which assume that basic things are not clear. The principle of clarity as common ground excludes what is logically and existentially impossible. So some things are just ruled out because they're logically impossible or existentially impossible, like nihilism. So we have spoken today about Chapter 1, Clarity, Philosophy, and Reason, but we only went over the clarity section and Appendix 1. So I'm going to pause here, and next we'll go over reason, the laws of thought. What is reason? So thank you for joining me for this series. I hope that you will like, subscribe, and share with your friends and have a conversation with others. Thanks. We'll see you in the next video.